Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Lock Podcast. I am your host, Ben Mostaller. We're already 1 week into the NFL. Last week, a little bit of a rocky start with our predictions, bets, daily fantasy, and start sit, which we'll go over in a minute. But we're going to recover. We're going to get on to week 2, and we're going to make things happen. Last week and the last 2 weeks, I should say, in college football have been really good for me. So if you're not following over on Instagram or TikTok, I do share my bets on there. For college football and the NFL. So make sure you check that out at Sports Lock Podcast. But let's take a look back in week 1 and see how we did. You can take a look that the win, loss, and spread were 8-8, so not good with the predictions there. But as we did good last year, I should say, the first week of this season, we did well with the over-unders, 11-4. So I'm not too mad about that there. Although I was really disappointed in the locks, only one of the locks hit. It was the Eagles winning there. They covered the spread against New England. Other than that, just some very disappointing games. I thought that Minnesota would win at home. They didn't. So that's a Pittsburgh and San Francisco would score over 40 points, but almost got there, just a little bit shy. But we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get those locks in, and we'll get the first week jitters out of the way. The week 1 daily fantasy lineup, I'm very disappointed in most of these guys on here. Geno Smith especially came out big in the first half with 100 yards and a touchdown, but only finished with 112 yards and a touchdown. Looked terrible in the second half. Our running backs were Joe Mixon and Miles Sanders, who finished very similarly. Miles Sanders had a better day. Only had 72 yards on the ground, 4 receptions, 26 yards, but he fumbled the ball, which kind of hurt him in the second half. Joe Mixon, 56 rushing yards, 3 receptions for 17 yards. That team just looked terrible against the Browns. I'm sure they'll bounce back this week. Our wide receivers were led by Keenan Allen, who finished 23rd. A pretty good day for him, 6 receptions for 76 yards. If he was able to snag a touchdown, he would have been right around the wide receiver 10. Tyler Lockett was the most disappointing out of all of them. He only finished with 3 fantasy points, 2 receptions for 10 yards. We also had Michael Thomas, who I really liked last week. I said get him while he was healthy. 5 receptions for 61 yards. Pretty good game for him there. The other wide receiver we had at the flex was Jahan Dotson, who only had 9. He had 5 receptions for 40 yards. In a low-scoring game, but he did outperform Terry McLaurin, as I thought he would at the beginning of the season. We then had our tight end, Tyler Higbee, who was okay. I thought he would do a lot better without Cooper Kupp, but Puka Nacua was the better option there. So 3 receptions, 49 yards. He really wasn't that off from being close to top 5. There was a lot of tight ends they were in that average of about 10 fantasy points. So not a great week for tight ends. Our defense was our best. We paid low for the Cardinals' defense, one of the cheapest last week, and they finished 3rd. They were able to get 6 sacks, an interception, 2 fumble recoveries, and a touchdown. So overall, 96 points. We look to do much better this upcoming week. Our start sits were all right on the sit part, especially with the first part. Geno Smith to start wasn't good, but sitting Daniel Jones was the way to go. 104 yards and 2 interceptions against the Dallas defense. I hope you listened to me there to sit him. Our start of Miles Sanders could have been a lot better, only 11.8. I was disappointed in the sit of Ramondre Stevenson because he ended up finishing 13th with 14.9. 25 yards, but he came handy in the passing game. 6 receptions for 64 yards. Told you to start Michael Thomas, 37th with 11.1. Not that great. Told you to sit wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. I think he could have done a lot better, but still not a bad performance. 7 receptions for 65 yards. It would have been a decent flex play for you there. And finally, starting Tyler Higbee wasn't the best with 7.9. Sitting Cole Kmet would have been a little bit better at 9.4. Higbee was really close, though. He had 5 more yards, only 2 less receptions, and he could have, again, been close to the top 5. So let's move past week 1. Let's get a fresh start into week 2. And I like these bets this week. I've already placed them. I'm really liking my locks. So let's get on with it. And we're going to start with tomorrow night, Thursday Night Football. Minnesota at Philadelphia. And we know that Kirk Cousins is the worst quarterback in primetime games. Going into Philadelphia, who pulled out a very good victory against a tough New England team in New England last week. And they're 7-point favorites at home. So I'm going to take that as a lock. I think the Eagles cover by at least a touchdown. They were able to win by 5 on the road. And they're taking on a Minnesota team who struggled against a team I thought that was going to be really bad, which was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So give me the Eagles as my first lock of the week, -7. And I'm playing under 48.5 points. I don't think Minnesota will be able to put up too many points on the board. Green Bay at Atlanta. This is a tough one on Sunday. We saw Green Bay pretty much put down the Bears. I was not expecting that. I actually chose Chicago against Atlanta, who played a tight one against the Carolina Panthers. I'm actually going to take Green Bay. I think what we saw last week out of them was very promising. If Aaron Jones doesn't play, I think the line switches to Atlanta -1.5. But the time being, I'm going to take Green Bay to win and cover that. I just think Green Bay's run defense did a very good job against Chicago last week, and that's really what Atlanta's going to try to do. So give me Green Bay on the road, and I'm going to play over 40.5 points. We then have the Raiders at the Bills. The Bills are 9.5-point favorites. The Raiders went into Denver and was able to get an impressive win there, while the Bills held an early lead against the Jets and allowed Zach Wilson to bring them back and win. I'm really concerned about the Bills. The Bills have looked terrible in the preseason. They looked terrible in their first game. Josh Allen is not the Josh Allen that we're used to. I'm really concerned about this team. So I still think they get the win. They get the momentum on their side, but it's going to be closer than the 9.5. So I like the Raiders to cover that in Buffalo. I like the way that Jimmy Garoppolo played last week. I also think they're going to get Josh Jacobs the ball more this week and run down the throat of Buffalo, just as the Jets did last week. So give me Buffalo to win, but the Raiders to cover and under 47. Baltimore's at Cincinnati. Baltimore wasn't that impressive in a win against Houston, and Cincinnati was god-awful in their loss against Cleveland. But they're bringing it back home. It's a divisional game. There's no way Joe Burrow puts up the same stat line he did last week. They improve. I think they win, but by a field goal. So give me the Bengals to win, but Baltimore to cover the 3.5. and under 46.5 points. My second lock of the week is going against my second favorite team, the Seattle Seahawks, but they're traveling to Detroit, and right now they're 5.5-point underdogs. I love Detroit -5.5 this week. They were able to go into a very tough Kansas City environment and get the win there. This offense looks fantastic. Their defense held up well, able to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes. Geno Smith didn't impress me last week. I think that Detroit easily wins by a touchdown. So give me Detroit as my second lock at -5.5. And I'm playing under 47 points because I want to say over slightly, but I'm concerned with how Geno Smith and those Seahawks played last week. The Chargers are at the Titans, both coming off disappointing losses. I do think the team that bounces back, though, is the Chargers. With that offense, I'm going to say -3. They'll cover that, and I'm playing over 45. Chicago's +3 at Tampa Bay. I'm shockingly going to say Tampa Bay covers that 3. They really impressed me. Baker Mayfield with a great day connecting with Mike Evans. Again, I thought Mike Evans would be the better wide receiver out of him and Godwin for the year. I know it's only week 1, but we'll see what happens. Chicago, I do think that they're going to bounce back a little bit more. Justin Fields has a better day. So I do think it's over 41.5, but I like Tampa Bay at home to go 2-0. Kansas City at Jacksonville is going to probably be the game of the day. I'm looking forward to this the most. Things are going to be a high-scoring affair, so I'm going over 51.5 points. And I'm going to take Jacksonville to win outright, +3. Give me that. I'm really concerned with the Chiefs and how many drop passes the wide receivers had last week. I really like how Jacksonville went into Indianapolis and beat them. I thought they beat them more than I expected. You know, the margin of victory was a lot higher. Calvin Ridley looks like the real deal, and Trevor Lawrence's connection. This is going to be a fun one to watch, but I like Jacksonville outright, and I'm taking them +3, of course. Indianapolis at Houston is my third lock. I think they're giving a lot of hate to Indianapolis right now, only being 1-point favorites. Houston should have played a little bit better against that Baltimore team who was making mistakes on the offensive end. And Indianapolis, Anthony Richardson looked good. Now, I know there's a question mark if he'll play this week, but if he does, I think that they go into Houston and win. So I like Indianapolis -1, so pretty much outright, and give me under 40 points. Now we move on to the 4 o'clock games and on, starting with the 49ers at the Rams. The Rams impressed me in week 1 against the Seahawks. They looked really good without Cooper Kupp. They were able to get production out of both running backs, Williams being the surprising one. And the up-and-coming Puka Nacua, who I love to say his name, had 15 targets, 10 catches, 129 yards. Phenomenal there. I do think the Niners are just that good, though. Their defense is much better. Their offense looked good against the Steelers. So I'm taking them -8 and to win. I think the Rams could give them a game. But I really like this 49ers team. And look how my sleeper Brock Purdy did last week, a top 10 fantasy quarterback. If you've been watching my sleeper podcast and my TikTok that I made, my sleeper of the year is Brock Purdy. You'll see why. And I'm playing over 44. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game. We then have my last lock of the week, and it's the Giants at the Cardinals. Right now, the Giants are 6-point favorites on the road, and I don't like that at all. I'm taking Arizona to cover +6 at home against the Giants. Look, I know the Giants took on a phenomenal defensive team in the Cowboys, losing 40-0, but still 40-0 they lost. This Cardinals defense was a number 3 defense in fantasy last week against now a Commanders team that looked really bad. But still, they were able to go into Washington and almost beat them. Now they're home against the Giants, who struggled that bad last week. And Arizona's defense looked actually pretty good. Love Arizona +6. Give that to me. Give me the win outright. I think it's an upset here. I'm playing under 39.5 points, by the way, as well. We have the Jets at the Cowboys. I think this would have been a lot more competitive with Aaron Rodgers, but it's just terrible what happened to him with that tear of his Achilles on Monday night, and prayers out to him for a great recovery. It really hurts Garrett Wilson and that team, but the Jets were still able to come back and beat the Bills. So right now they're 9.5-point underdogs on the road, and I like Dallas to win and to cover that. The way that they dismantled the Giants, I think they can dismantle a lot of teams on the defensive end. So I think this is going to be a lower scoring game because the Jets have a pretty good defense as well, playing under 39.5. Washington at Denver probably will be the most boring game of the day, but give me Denver -3.5 at home and under 38.5 points. Miami at New England will be a fun one. New England actually looked really good against the Eagles last week, and Miami looked phenomenal with the connection of Hill and Tua Tagovailoa over in LA. I like Miami on the road -2. I think it's a very close, good game. I'm playing over 46.5 points. The Dolphins defense is just average, and Mac Jones actually looked pretty good last week, 3 touchdown passes. So I think this is a higher scoring affair, but give me Miami on the road. We then have the Saints at the Panthers on Monday Night Football, 2 Monday night games. And the Panthers looked okay in their first game. The Saints, a little bit better. I think Derek Carr is going to be fine there. I like Michael Thomas and how he found Chris Olave as well. I like the Saints -3 on the road in Carolina. You got the rookie QB there in Bryce Young. I do think they improved this week, but not enough to beat the Saints, and I'm playing over 40.5. And finally, for Monday Night Football, we close out with the Browns at the Steelers. And as much as I like the Steelers, they were pathetic last week. They need to make some coaching changes. And the Browns usually have the Steelers number. So give me the Browns -2.5 in Pittsburgh, over 39.5 points, because I do think that Steelers offense bounces back a little bit. But some of those injuries with Cam Hayward and Deontay Johnson really hurt them. And last week, early on in the season, when Cleveland played Pittsburgh, they screwed up a bet by running backwards. There was a fumble recovery. Cleveland scooped in the end zone. Cost me by bet. So I have bad taste about that. I'm going Cleveland -2.5. My daily fantasy lineup, I like a little bit more than last week. We're going with some top guys from last week. We're going to start with my sleeper of the year, Brock Purdy. Only $5,700 against a Rams defense that the Seahawks should have lit up. He had 220 yards and 2 touchdowns against what I thought was a great Steelers defense. So I'm taking him at that price, which means we can pay up a little bit more for some of our wide receivers. I like my running backs this week, though. James Conner, only 6,200 for Arizona. He had 14 carries for 62 yards and 5 receptions. They're going to use him a lot at home against that Giants defense, which gave up 40 points and 122 yards with 3 touchdowns on the ground. So love me some James Conner this week. I'm also going to go back with Miles Sanders at the price of 5,500. He tied for the 4th most carries in week 1, and he should improve being at home. And I think he does find the end zone. Our wide receivers are awesome this week, starting with Stephon Diggs at 8,000. What a great year, or what year he had last year, but what a great week 1 he had as well. He was 2nd most receptions in week 1 with 10. He also added 102 yards and a touchdown. You're going up against a poor Raiders defense, and you're at home after a loss against the Jets. You're going to want to bounce back in a big way, and they're going to find Diggs. Calvin Ridley, 7,200. Great price for him against the Chiefs this week. Phenomenal last week, 11 targets to him, 101 yards and a touchdown. He's going to be the guy that Trevor Lawrence relies on. And he put up very similar numbers last week as what Amon-Ra St. Brown did against the Chiefs in week 1. And they're at home. So I do like me some Calvin Ridley at that price. What a steal for Brandon Aiyuk here. Only 5,800. And he was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy last week. He lit up that Steelers defense, 8 receptions, 129 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And if you watch some of my past videos, you saw that I predicted Aiyuk would do better than Deebo Samuel this year. And I love that connection with him and Purdy. Great numbers last week. He will light it up again this week. Again, of course, Brock Purdy goes off. Brandon Aiyuk will as well. My tight end's Hunter Henry, and you get a steal for him at 3,800. He actually finished as the tight end 1 last week. 5 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown. If you take away the touchdown, he still would have finished as a tight end 5. We're looking for that connection early. They love the tight ends in New England. Looks like Hunter Henry's the guy that Mac Jones has a connection with. So give me Hunter Henry at that price. At the flex, we are going with Puka Nacua. 15 targets week 1, 10 receptions, 119 yards. He's Stafford's guy for now. He's filling in for Cooper Kupp. There's his guy. And for the cheap price of 4,900, gimme. And we're going to bounce back to the Cardinals defense for only 2,600. They were the number 3 defense last week, as I said. They're going up against the New York Giants, who put up 0 points last week. The Cardinals are at home. Love that price there. Love my daily fantasy lineup this week. And finally, the week 2 start sit. We talked about Mac Jones a minute ago. Start him. He's going up against a poor Dolphins defense. I think he can light him up. He was number 2 in fantasy last week, 316 yards and 3 touchdowns against a much tougher Eagles defense. Give me Mac Jones to start. I'm sitting Russell Wilson, 177 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. The yards weren't there. The touchdowns were lucky. I think it's a lower scoring game, so I'd be sitting Russell Wilson. I'm starting James Conner, as I just said. Why? Because of my daily fantasy lineup. I'm sitting Breece Hall. I know that's kind of questionable, but he really only had 1 huge run that he eventually got caught on. He should have busted it for a touchdown, but he didn't, coming back from the injury. They're going up against that Cowboys defense, who was just great last week. So I'm sitting Breece Hall if I got him. Starting Calvin Ridley at home against the Chiefs. He's a staple now. I know people drafted him thinking that he would be the wide receiver 1, taking a risk. He proved that last week. Saying Garrett Wilson, sad to say that, but it's going to be a trouble for him against the Cowboys defense. And I'm starting Hunter Henry, the number 1 tight end last week. And this week I'm sitting Tyler Higbee. I don't like the matchup against the 49ers defense, who shut down the Steelers tight ends to only 3 receptions for 22 yards and a touchdown, which was their only touchdown. But still, I think that they shut down Higbee. Puka Nacua is the guy that benefits. That is the predictions for week 2 here. Thank you guys for listening in. If you're not following me already over on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter, please do so. And again, I make weekly podcasts to give you predictions, bets, daily fantasy, and start sit predictions. So make sure to check it out. And if you want bets, if you're on my Instagram or TikTok already, I post them on there. Thanks for listening in. I wish you the best of luck in week 2 of your fantasy football and sports betting week. I'll talk to you guys next week.